Hey friend, I'm Danielle Damrell, and I am so grateful that you're listening to the Created Worthy podcast. This show is all about honoring the life stories of women from different ages, beliefs, backgrounds, and experiences. Everyone's got a story, and instead of getting stuck in the trap of unworthiness, this is a safe place for stories to be shared. On this show, we chat about the transformative power of creative processing too, and how we can utilize our God-given creativity with intention to heal, grow, find joy, create simplicity in the midst of our chaotic lives. So pull up a seat at our table because we are all created worthy. Hello, welcome back to the Created Worthy podcast. Today, I am joined by another worthy warrior, Rachael Adams. Rachael is the author of A Little Goes a Long Way and the host of Love Offering podcast. Rachael hopes to help women realize their God-given purpose and significance. She and her husband, Bryan, live in Kentucky with their two children, Will and Kate. Her work has been featured on Good Morning America. What? Crosswalk, Proverbs 31, Today Parenting, and YouVersion. Wow, I'm like shook. I didn't even read this before recording, so here we are.
Honestly, I still pinch myself over some of those things. It's like
That's
those are those
incredible.
only God moments. That's like there's no other
Yes.
explanation but him.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to get into all of this. So Rachael, she was once a stay-at-home mom who struggled to believe that her life was significant. She was told that her work was important, but in a sea of mundane tasks, it certainly didn't feel like it. Then God started to do a real work in her life, and she began to find fulfillment, significance, and purpose. Not because of her circumstances or anything that changed there, but because her heart changed. Now, every week on her podcast, she shares the encouraging and inspiring stories of other women who are dedicated to living out their faith in God and believing that their offering matters. So, Rachael and I met briefly at a women's ministry leaders retreat last September, but honestly didn't have a whole lot of time to talk. So I have been so looking forward to this time together. Rachael, thank you so much for joining me and us, my listeners, on the Created Worthy podcast. We cannot wait to hear even more about your real life story.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And Danielle, you're right. I saw you at this getaway, and I kept thinking this woman radiates the heart of Jesus. You just have
Oh,
such a like something that makes people so drawn to you. And so I kept looking at you across the room and like, I want to get to know that woman. And so I'm so thankful for this opportunity to do so. Although I know I'm on this side of the mic, but it's like where I have a podcast too, I'm always like wanting to ask you all the questions as well.
oh my gosh. We're going to have to exchange information after because I feel like we've got some voice memos to be had after this conversation.
For
That's like my
sure.
way of relationship building from across the country now is like, hey, I know we don't always have time for like a FaceTime date or a coffee date over Zoom, but we can fit in some voice memos. So we'll have to exchange information after because I felt the same way. I was like, that Rachael girl, one, she looks familiar and I don't know why. Probably God. And two, um, I think I had heard whispers of little things that you've done throughout your career in your ministry. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta know more about her, what she does. And I still have yet to find out. So that's what we're here to do today.
Right. Oh, well, I'm a small town Kentucky girl, born and raised in the same little lake town. And our claim to fame here is that we are the houseboat capital of the world. And so we are actually
Oh,
the largest man-made lake in the whole United States. So that's kind of our claim to
wow.
fame.
I love it.
And so I've always grown up here. My brother is the mayor. I, my all my family still lives here. I'm the middle girl of two boys, two brothers. I grew up. My parents divorced when I was in second grade, and didn't grow up in a Christian home. My dad was not around. So basically being raised by a single mother in so many ways. She worked a lot, just really hard trying to take care of the family and
Mhm.
finances and home and all those things. I have a good relationship with my dad now, but I don't have any memories of him as a child. And so, and when I was in second grade, they divorced, and my dad remarried a couple years later. And at that point, he married a Christian woman who led him to the Lord and really transformed his life. And we started going to church at that point. I do have a few memories, maybe of going to like a vacation Bible school or something like that and learning the books of the Bible. But it wasn't until I was in middle school and went to a Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames play at a church.
What? Tell me
And
about that. I've never heard of that. Is that like a common play that
they
Christian
have it
churches
almost
do or
every year at this church, and they have for
okay.
years and years and years. And it basically just shows the stark difference in the two realities of heaven and hell.
Is it
Lots of
scary?
angels and lights and Jesus on one side, and then lots
Yeah.
of eerie lights and darkness and fire. The realities of hell. And so,
Right.
at that moment, as a middle school aged girl, I accepted the Lord as my savior because truthfully, I did not want to go to hell. I
Yeah.
was looking at these two options of eternity and thought, I don't want to go there, and I do I do want to go to the place of light and
Yeah.
happiness and love. And that's all I knew at that point.
Yeah,
And
that's what I was
so,
going to ask is like, was that a scary experience for you? Like as
for
an intro,
sure,
yeah, as an
absolutely, it
introduction to
was a
God in that way, I can only imagine that like what kids are already really concrete thinkers, you know? So for that to be like, you either are this or you're going here. It's like, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
tell me, tell me about
yeah.
what happened next.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it took me to my knees, and I was scared more than anything.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to hell, and so, but I do believe that my salvation was secure in that moment. I
Yeah.
do believe that, but my behavior never really changed. I didn't know anything about the Lord. I wasn't necessarily being discipled, or I wasn't reading my Bible. I wasn't praying. I didn't have a relationship with the Lord at that point. And so I knew him as my savior, and that was it. And so, I do believe that God continued to put special people in my life. I had friends that their families were believers, and I would spend the night at their house, and I would witness the way that they would live their lives, and they would pray, and they would go on mission trips, and they would go to church, and they would invite me. And so God did sprinkle those people into my life in my high school and college years. But I finally, and the very first day of college, I met my husband, Bryan. And the first time I met him, he had a black eye. And my very first thought, Danielle, was, I need to stay away from this guy. He
You're
is
like, he's a
trouble.
fighter. Something
He's a
happened. He
fighter.
got into some weird circles already, and it's only day one.
Yes. But my husband tells the story that he called home that night and told his parents that he met the woman that he was going to marry when he saw me. And so it just took me a little bit longer
Oh,
to come around.
yeah.
But I imagine that God in that moment was just looking down, at us like, oh, Rachel, if you only knew, you're going to be married with two kids in a little small town.
Yes.
And so, but my husband, his parents have been married. They're, still married 40 plus years. His grandparents are still married. His grew up in a Christian home. His sister is a pastor's wife of a large church and in their community.
Wow.
And so his just upbringing was just very different than mine. And so he actually I guess to complete the story of the black eye, he was a college basketball player, and so he had
Okay.
gotten hurt like from an elbow in basketball practice. But he is a fighter in a really good way. He's such a
Mm,
determined, faithful man. And so I think that description of him even is kind of fitting, that he is a fighter in so many ways and a protector. And I'm thankful for
yeah.
that. But then I moved him to my hometown because he originally wasn't from here. He loves to fish, so that wasn't I didn't have to twist his arm too much. And so we started to look for a church, but didn't get too serious about our walk with the Lord either. To be honest, we were just happy newlyweds creating a home. But it wasn't until I had my son Will, who is 15, and that I really started to just, there's something about having a child that makes you think, okay, I'm in charge of another human being's soul,
Hmm.
and I need to really steward this well. And I need to make sure that I'm leading by example. And so it was at that point. Will was honestly not a very good baby. He cried all the time. He had lots of health issues. I wasn't a very good mom, if I'm being honest. I did all the wrong things. I would put him on a dryer in a car seat to try to my husband would drive him around
You gotta
on
do
a
what you gotta
lawnmower to try
do.
to get him to nap. I mean,
Ooh, on the lawnmower. I've never thought of that one.
yeah. I mean, no matter what time it was in the middle of the night. I mean, we were those crazy people with a
Mm.
newborn. Um, and so I was just really lonely. Will, because he cried so much and because I was so anxious and so nervous and ClickList didn't, exist at the time and all of those things. I stayed home a lot because I was nursing. He wouldn't take a bottle. I would hold him to sleep. And so I didn't really have friends that had children at that time. And so at that point, I just was lonely. It was my son Will and my husband would be at work, and I would be holding him, and I didn't have social media at the time, but I didn't want to move because I didn't want to make a sound to wake him up. And so it
Yeah.
was at that point that I started to read my Bible. I'm like,
Mm.
okay, I'm sitting here, I have this silence. And so I started to spend time with the Lord for the very first time. And so I say often, but I really believe it, that as I was holding my son Will and I was learning how to become a mother, that I believe that I was learning to see God as my father. And I felt like he was holding me. I just started to develop a relationship and learn of God's love as opposed to just being scared of not going to
Mm.
hell. And so it was a major shift and an epiphany for me to develop that relationship with him. And then I finally got the courage to go to toddler tales at the library, which sounds ridiculous, but I just was so anxious as a young mom. And so I finally went and got out of the house and just thought, I'm just, even though I had that relationship with the Lord, I needed people. We need community
Yes,
here on earth.
that's right.
And so there at the library, I met a woman. She just immediately, I'm introverted. And so I was, kind of just backwards a little bit. And she came up to me and just spoke and said hello and introduced herself. And she invited me to MOPS, which is the Mothers of Preschoolers, that was going to meet the
Yeah.
next day. And so I ended up getting courage again and went to MOPS. And then God provided another woman who was extroverted and said hello and introduced herself and was really friendly and made me feel welcome. And she actually invited me to attend a women's Bible study at a local
Mm.
church. So again, I got up the courage to go to this Wednesday night Bible study. And then there, another woman invited me to come on Sunday morning. And then as I was at Sunday morning service, God provided another woman to invite me to Sunday school. And so you can see
Yeah.
the repetitive nature of how God continued to bring women into my life that were bold enough to and took the risk to introduce themselves and to be friendly and to speak. And then I was able to take the courage and have the courage to then accept the invitation. And so I'm so
Hmm.
thankful for those women that God placed in my life over and over again to invite me and draw me closer to the Lord. And so at one point, the women's ministry leader said, Rachel, I really would like for you to start leading a Tuesday morning Bible study. And of course,
Yeah.
Danielle, I mean, I just had read the Bible through, in the rocking
Yeah.
chair just like a year or two earlier. And I'm thinking, how in the world am I supposed to lead a women's Bible study? But as I prayed about it, I thought, you know what? No, I can brew some coffee. I can put in a video. I can order some books and I can facilitate some conversation. I can do that.
Yes.
And so I did. And so that has honestly, I still lead that Bible study. And it has just grown.
Wow.
As when I first had the idea to write a book that I feel like God placed in my heart. And it's just set into trajectory everything else I'm doing, like the podcast, and even set into trajectory of how I met you, And so I'm
Yes.
just so thankful for all the ways that God has continued to lovingly reveal himself to me, first as my savior, then as my father, and then slowly, as my Lord and as my redeemer, and now honestly my friend. He's my very favorite person to talk to, and so he continues just to reveal more and more of himself as I'm ready, and I'm still learning and growing in my relationship with him, and I know I will continue that until I'm in eternity with him one day.
Hmm. That was so beautiful. Like your how you just told your testimony in such like a succinct and confident way. I just have to tell you is like, oh, wow. I'm gonna cry. Here we are. This is unexpected. Um, it inspires me so much because you are so clear on the testimony that God has written for you in your life. And it's not like you were born into a household in which having a close relationship with God or having a father who is loving and good and protective in nature was natural for you. And still you sit here and are able to say, like, this is how God showed up for me, not just in, you know, the way that I was introduced to him in the beginning, which was kind of fear-based, but still, like, you're very confident in, like, I knew at that moment that I was saved and my salvation was confirmed and assured. I would like you have full confidence in who God was in your life in that moment at 10 years old, right?
Mhm.
And then from there, like being able to walk into your college years and meet your husband and develop a relationship with somebody who also, like, God clearly put you guys together because it sounds like he loved the Lord as well. And then from there, like having a baby and I just like it so encouraged my heart when you said that as you were learning to become a loving mother, God was teaching you that he was a loving father. And man, that's a really powerful statement. Like, and something I relate to so much because I had a really my daughter was a great baby, don't get me wrong, but I was 19 and I was in a toxic relationship and I was so scared to be a mom. And I also feel like that was the time that God really showed up for me and changed my life and the whole trajectory of my life because he really did come in and just remind me that he is more than just a divine being who's looking out for me, but rather like he is a father. He is a friend. He is not somebody, and he is not a human who can hurt me, but rather somebody who is the source of goodness and the source of truth and the source of light and the source of freedom, which was something that I was so like badly seeking in that season. And so, yeah, all of that to say, I'm just very encouraged by the way you were able to just so confidently speak to even your own courage, your courage to say yes to the women who God brought into your life. I think that that is something that I don't want to like breeze over because a lot of times like we hear or we've had experiences, you know, where people will say at a coffee shop or something, can I pray for you? Or you meet someone at some random place at the gym and they're like, do you want to go to church or do you want to join this Bible study? Or maybe even an Instagram message, right? Like, hey, I would love for you to join me here. God shows up in those little moments and it's not just about him showing up in our lives and like responding to the call, but he has to show up in somebody else's life for them to reach out to, you know? Like it's kind of one of those takes two to tango kind of moments. Like, and I think a lot of times we minimize, not intentionally, this is all subconscious, um, the little signs that God plants in our lives and he like paints in our lives for the exact things that we're actually longing for. So if that's belonging and you get a message from somebody on Facebook that's like, "Hey, I just wanted to invite you to this like Zoom community Bible study that we do," or something like that, like or you hear about something like I know there's like Bible study fellowship, right? And there's all these different groups and places where community can be found. Um, God doesn't bring those things to our attention for us to just ignore them. And I love that you spoke on how, like, he brought people into your life. He brought specifically women into your life to love you and to encourage you. And then they offered you to continue to connect in a different way. And you had the courage to say yes. And that
Mhm.
is a wonderful and beautiful way of approaching that and reflecting on that is like it took courage, right? We have anxiety, especially like as a new mom. That's like all of the hormones, being a first time mom and having all of the new mom worries anyways, feeling kind of like out of your body. I don't know if that was an experience for you, but it was kind of hard for me to like feel like I was my own self for a while because especially when I was nursing, like I was her food supply. I was still keeping her alive, even though she was outside of my body and I was no longer growing her. But while I was growing her too, it was like, my body is not my own. And so even going through that transition back into like, oh yeah, I am my own person, but now I have the responsibility of keeping this little human alive. So that's a whole thing. And it does take a village to raise a baby. Like, trust, my daughter would not be half the woman. She's 8 years old, but she's a little woman. She
Hmm.
would not be half the like person that she is without the community of women who have rallied around her and protected her and prayed for her and have been there for her in all of the ways that I, as like a healing, struggling mom, just wasn't able to. And as I was learning to be a better mom. And so it does take courage, all of that to say. And so yeah, I just am so, so, so encouraged by your testimony and by your confidence in what God has done for you. Now, I would love to go back for a moment because I know you have two kids. Can you tell us a little bit about your second experience with motherhood and how maybe things kind of shifted for you from being a mom of one to a mom of two and the dynamics that came with that?
Yeah, so my daughter is Kate, and she's
Hi, Kate.
13. Yeah, Will and Kate. So it's like the royal couple
Oh
before the
my
royal couple got married,
gosh.
right?
That is so cute. I didn't even think of that.
So yeah, so she honestly I there was a lot more freedom and a lot more grace and a lot more mercy even just on myself with having a second child. Although my husband says often like you go from like being zone defense to man defense, like everybody's on deck when you have that second child. But I started to I think one of the things I've struggled so much with has been just my value because my dad is an entrepreneur. I mentioned him earlier, and he is very results oriented. And I grew up like signing contracts that I would achieve a goal by a certain amount of time on this date, and we would sign it. And so that's kind of how I grew up. And then after college, I was worked in the family business and did accounts payable and accounts receivable. And so then when I became a stay-at-home mom full time with Will and Kate, when my husband would come home from work and he would ask me how I was, I immediately started to list off all the things that I had done because I wanted his validation. I wanted his affirmation. I wanted, just to think him to think I was doing a good job, as silly as that sounds. But he was really just wanting to know, like, Rachel, how's your heart? How are you? And so, but I think it just is so hard when you move like from the boardroom to the playroom and, your results are maybe it seems unseen what you're doing and ordinary and routine and so I just kind of really struggled, I guess, with even just my self-esteem and self-worth in that season. And honestly, even still do sometimes I have a conversation with the Lord, like, Lord, what did I do for you today? Like, are you proud of me, Lord? Just wanting, I think, still that
Yes.
affirmation and validation from the Lord. But, I just feel like the Lord has communicated over and over again to me through his word and that, just through his Holy Spirit that, Rachel, you are significant. Regardless of
Mm.
what you do, I love you simply because of who you are. And so that is a message that I'm still trying to learn, if I'm being honest. It's a message that I want my children to know. I want Will and Kate to both just feel loved because of who they are. When I first held both of them, I adored them. Even when they were just in my stomach, I adored them.
Right.
They didn't have to do anything to earn my love. And so I think I want them to know that. And honestly, I feel like the Lord is the same way. We should love him just simply for who he is, and not
Mm.
anything that he does for us either. But that's still a journey that I'm on, trying to find my significance not in what I do, but simply for who I am. Although there is
Yeah,
value in what we do, we just can't gain our value from what we do. But I think that's been my
exactly.
journey in motherhood. I love being a mom. I think even though some days it feels like it can be insignificant, especially in those early years when they can't say thank you, they can't give you a hug, you're,
Right.
cleaning up Cheerios for the 100th time in the same day and toys and building blocks and playing dolls and all those things. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like this, there's moments you enjoy it, but there's moments like, is this all there is? But yet we're
Yeah.
shaping the next generation. And so God is slowly teaching me, I think just so many lessons. And even still in this new season of having two middle schoolers, we're shaping souls,
Yes.
and
Shaping souls.
so what a privilege, but what a responsibility.
Yes. So I keep hearing even the seemingly insignificant is significant.
Mhm.
And that's, I think, although it could maybe sound cliche, it really is as simple as that. When we view something as insignificant, something even as important as motherhood, right? Raising children. And I hear that from so many women who are like, I'm just
Just.
raising
Mhm.
children. I'm
Mhm.
just a stay-at-home mom. I'm like, No, you're doing the most important job that any human being could be called to.
Yeah.
And you're doing it well because you've chosen to stay home with them and to love them and to teach them and to prioritize them. And not to say that working moms, I'm a working mom myself, aren't doing it right. To each their own, right? There is a different call and a different path for everybody in their lives and in their parenthood as well. Um, but it is not a just. Being
Mhm.
a mom you're never just a mom. You are a called and chosen mom. You are a equipped and qualified mom. And the insignificant, what you consider insignificant, is not what God considers insignificant. I think when he was knitting that baby together within you, I don't think he was like, yeah, let's just make this one thread insignificant. No, that's
Mhm.
not how he operates. That is 100% not how God is. God is in every single detail. There's simplicity in the complex, right? And that's where, like, it's kind of that like mystery of God. There are so many things about God that are kind of mysterious, but it's because, like, of the dichotomies that God is, of both he is simple and he is complex. He is significant, but also doesn't require a whole lot of space, right? And so when we approach motherhood, I think that it's really, really important that we just process and create space for God to fill us up. And for the sake of being a little bit cliche as well, like, we really are created worthy.
Mhm.
Like, we are created by a good creator who is worthy, and therefore we are worthy. Now, here's where it gets a little bit more complicated is as we grow up, we get to decide where our source of worth is found, right? So we can try to find our worth in ourselves. We can try to find our worth in the works of our hands. We can try to find our worth in our significant others or in things that we create or ideas or books that we write or in our children. But that if that is where you're trying to find your worth, you're never going to find it. Like, spoiler alert, you're never going to find your worth in another human. You're never going to find your worth in any material item. You're never going to find your worth in another anything. And you're never going to find it in yourself. But if you go to the source of worthiness, you go to the source of light and love and all things good to find your worth, you will find it there. And that is like, that's the basis of created worthy, right? Is that we really, really do have a choice where our worth is found. And Rachel, I'm the same. I still to this day like struggle with worthlessness. Like, I feel that's one of the biggest attacks I struggle with from the enemy is feeling worthless. Does any of my worth or does any of my work even matter? Does
Mhm.
created worthy even make sense? Does am I smart enough to have the job that I have? Or do I really think I'm a qualified enough person to be raising a child? There are so many different ways that worthlessness shows up in our lives. And it really is up to us to silence those voices by going straight to the source of all things good and letting him speak into our lives. And so with that, I kind of want to just transition into creative processing. How much have I told you about creative processing, or have you heard about my revelation creative processing story?
Tell me. Nope, I
Okay.
haven't. So yeah, tell me.
So in 2021, after a really hard year in 2020, it was the same year I started Created Worthy. The Lord dropped the term creative processing into my heart. And the difference between the creative process and creative processing is that the creative process leads to an external result, and creative processing leads to an internal result. And what the Lord showed me was that through our innate creativity, whether we consider ourselves creative or not, that doesn't matter. If He is a creative God and we are created in His image, then we are creative, right? We are creative beings. We all have creative minds. We just use them differently. And what he showed me is that our creativity is an innate healing gift that he has given us. And so when we are able to activate our creativity with intention and pair it with intention, it actually can be a tangible way to achieve the things that we're really longing for, like love, peace, belonging, freedom, and really any of those feelings that we feel we get stuck in and can't really tap into, but we can, and especially quickly if we engage in our gifts of creativity. So the actual definition that he gave me was it's how we it's a tool that we can use to activate our creative minds to process through a certain intention. So I recommend using a prompt like the purpose of, enter your creative outlet, whether that is creating spreadsheets, cleaning your house, painting, journaling, writing. You name a way that your creative mind is activated, and that you can use it, is to process. So the purpose of, for example, you said spending time in the quiet. So the purpose of this quiet time is to process my goals for 2024. Or the purpose of this quiet time is to process my motherhood journey or feeling worthless today. Or the purpose of going on this walk. A lot of people say that going on walks is a creative method for them. I love that. I agree. I think that going on walks and getting in nature activates our creative minds in so many different ways. Same with having a shower. Taking a shower can be a creative method. But the purpose of going on a walk is to process my gratitude for my family. And so it's getting in that practice of being able to utilize our creativity as an intention setting tool to bring us the intention that we are setting in our lives. And it works. It just works. And I don't have all the science behind it. I do have some of the science. I have the science of how it works in practice through like neuroplasticity. So just like any other muscle, when you use it consistently, it does become something that is like muscle memory. And then it's a lot easier to get through days like overwhelm, or get through days without overwhelm, and get through anxiety without just feeling completely depleted and like you've been hit by a truck. Cause man, I've been there. But um, in practice, it really does change our brains just as gratitude changes our brains. I am working on getting a lot more science behind why it works because the research is out there. I just haven't compiled it yet. So that's something that's like in the works right now. And I'm excited to be able to have more of that so that I can be like, yeah, God revealed this. And also here's the science, because how cool is that? But yeah, that's my creative processing soapbox.
Well, I was gonna say, so my first Well, everybody, you had mentioned that I'm a writer, and so when a lot of times when every morning I try to pray and read my Bible and journal, and then as I've been trying to write books and things, a lot of times I will still get stuck. And so when I get stuck, a walk will always help me. A walk, it sounds crazy, but a walk, a bath or a shower, some worship music, but just almost just
Yeah.
changing my routine, changing what I'm doing, like even just taking a walk or just even going somewhere. Because I think if I do like to work in the quiet. Quiet is really good. But I think if I'm just sitting, I'm like, okay, brain, think, think, think. And there's just all this pressure and it's like nothing's coming. If I just change my location, change what I'm doing, and especially if it's movement oriented, it
Yeah.
always helps me. Or water oriented. How strange is that?
Yes, I love that though. I think that there's something to be said about engaging different senses as well, you know? So it doesn't surprise me too much that water would be something that helps you to kind of generate some new ideas or get through that block because it's engaging a different sense. So that's really interesting. And that's another thing that I just love about creative processing is that it's something that is a lot of people, most people, I would say, already utilize it. Like we already
Mm,
do this. It's just having a term so that we can like know better, do better type of thing. And then also
mhm.
like understanding the importance of intention. Yeah, go and take that walk, go take that shower, frame it as creativity because
Yeah.
truly that's the side of your brain that it's activating. Set an intention. Sometimes my intentions are literally just like, I'm spiraling. I need to not spiral. Or like, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Like it sometimes like they're words that I don't even know are real words. I'm just like, it's like I just need something to be different, Lord.
Yeah.
So my intention
Yeah.
might just be like, God, literally, God.
No,
But
it's true.
yeah,
Where
go
I
ahead.
am introverted, I do need quiet, and I know that, and I know that that's like, especially like worship. I say quiet, but worship music is helpful. Drive is helpful, but I will
Yeah,
always, if I'm stuck with
driving. That's the
my,
best.
yes, but if I'm stuck with like my thoughts on writing specifically, and I take a walk, I always take my phone because then I'll start to voice message myself instead of typing with my fingers. I'm like typing,
Yes.
with my mouth, in many ways because I'm just putting a voice.
A voice
What am I trying to
memo.
say?
Yeah. Well, you're like
Thank you.
voice blogging.
Clearly, I can't use my voice right now.
That's okay. I feel you. I think I have a stutter most days because I'm like, ah, da, 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 da. Like on every client call, I'm like, I lost my words. I can't, my words. But
Brain
I,
and mouth connect.
yes, come on, please. So, yes, but I know exactly what you mean. I love voice memos so much. Video, I have some like video journaling for different times. But I think also just like leaning into discernment in that, right? Like it's okay if you don't journal every single day. You can journal one day, record a voice memo in your phone the next day, show up on video 2 weeks from now, and all of those still matter. All of those ways of processing are still important. As long as like you're leaning into discernment and you're like, okay, I need to process something, so I'm going to do that instead of just pushing it down. That's where we get into trouble, is when we just ignore that like desire that is innately within us to process the thing that we're going through. We can't just sit here and be like, yeah, things are really hard right now, but I'm just and this really is like this is a whole soapbox thing in itself. So I will try to not go down this path too far. But like when we just sit down and when we're stressed and overwhelmed and watch Netflix, we are not processing. We are stuffing. And what happens is that builds and that builds, and we've all done it, and it builds and it builds, and then we explode. Or we implode and we feel all of the things that we've been trying not to feel all at once, and our self-worth is just in the trash. We have no self-worth. We don't even know where to find it. We don't know which way is up. And we can prevent that from happening by simply processing the reality of our lives in real time, every day, in the little moments. finding significance in the seemingly insignificant, right? And yeah, it's just, I will never stop being passionate about one, processing, and two, just like viewing, having a much wider view of creativity than just painting, drawing, being an artist. I think it's so much more than that. And I think that it's built within us so that we can process, right? And so that we can get through our lives and experience the things that God has for us in that joy and peace and love.
Yeah. Well, as you were even just talking, I'm thinking how often I process with friends. We
Yes.
were, like on Marco Polo or on Voxer or over coffee.
Yes.
You start to just think like, am I thinking clearly? Like, am I processing this correctly? What I just did on my walk or what I just,
Yeah.
have been thinking on my drive. But then to actually, and then of course, talking with the Lord about it and then, but talking with other people and then brainstorming ideas. And it's amazing. Somebody can say something and it sparks a whole nother idea. And
Yeah.
I especially love to process with other people.
Oh my gosh, it's my favorite. I'm on voice memos like that. That's what at the beginning of our conversation, I was like, we need to exchange numbers because I'm like, that is one of my favorite ways to process. I think that that's where it comes down to being really intentional, right, with the people that you're talking to and making sure that you are stewarding the relationships that you have well, one, and then also you're setting boundaries with the relationships that not to say you need to cut everyone off, but you have the right to protect your time and who you give it to. And so we get to lean into our discernment and be wise about that even. Um, and when you find your people or you even just find your one person who can feed your soul and it's okay for those people to shift in different seasons. But when you find someone who you can pour into and they can pour into you, and it can really be that transformational versus transactional friendship, like every that is an incredible way to process, right? And it's, of course, like there are a lot of different things that weigh into how to build those kinds of friendships, but it all starts with one probably seemingly insignificant step, right? Of just saying yes to showing up to that MOPS group that you've been invited to, or listening to that podcast that someone sent you.
Yeah. No, and I was just even just thinking, the importance of people in our interactions and how we make them feel and what we say. And I would just want to compliment you because before we hit record, you were so kind. You're like, well, so tell me where you live. Oh, I'm actually going to be near to you. And there's this group of girls that you don't know, and we barely know each other. But I think that we should all get together and do this thing. And so, like, what a chance you took to extend that invitation. And like how kind that was of you. And so I just want everybody listening to know you practice what you're preaching, and it makes a difference. It makes people feel loved and welcomed and accepted and like they belong. And I think those moments, even though you didn't think it was a big deal, it's a big deal. And so I just
Thank
want to
you.
compliment you and just encourage everybody listening. Take the chance, even if you're introverted,
Yeah.
and even if you're extroverted, you just never know who's going to be talking about. You're going to be part of their testimony. You're
Yeah.
going to be part of their testimony and leading them
That's
closer to
true.
Christ.
Oh, well, thank you for that. And also, yes. And for all of that fellow extroverts out there, because I am an extrovert, you are an introvert. So I love that we have this dynamic right now. Um, but if you're an extrovert, ladies, men, whoever's listening to this, listen to the discernment in your heart and have the courage to ask the introverts because you've been gifted with that personality type for a reason.
Mm,
So ask the questions. It's okay if people say no. That
yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that. But it is it's a responsibility in a sense to be willing to just say like, "Hey, I'm doing this thing and I'd love to see you or I'd love to invite you to a coffee date." I literally set up a coffee date on my Calendly for just people who are like, "Oh my gosh, we should get coffee," because I had said that to so many people and then never actually scheduled. And I now I just send them the link and I'm like, I know this is really weird, but I have a really hard time with time blindness and like promising that I will get to you or like get something set up and then just like my email's out of control, my texts are out of control. So please just schedule something and I promise I'll show up. But like even carving, creating paths in which you can follow through with your word, so that you can be in other people's lives if the Lord is leading you to, or you can connect them with resources and communities. Like if that's the type of personality that you have, I encourage you to step into it, because God is so going to reward that. In just like it feels, not that it's all about feeling, but it feels like I am walking in my full calling way more when I'm able to just say, hey, I see you. I love you. I'm praying for you. If I send a text to someone and they're like, oh my gosh, I needed that. Like that one confirmed step or confirmation means so much more to me than any dollar that could ever come to my bank account through my business, you know? And so, yeah, that's just a little encouragement to any of the extroverts out there. But let's wrap this thing up. Rachel, before we get going, can you tell us anything about your life and business that might be coming up later in 2024? And then where listeners can find and connect with your beautiful soul. This has been so fun.
Well, it has been so fun. And so thank you for the invitation to connect with you and each listener. So yeah, A Little Goes a Long Way, 52 Days to a Significant Life is already out. But in December of 2024, I have another devotional that's Everyday Prayers for Love that's coming out and going to be releasing. So I'm really excited about
Wow.
that project because I have the Love Offering podcast, and I'm seeing your sweatshirt right now that says Radiate Love,
Yes.
which is just gorgeous and so speaks to my heart so much because I really just want to help myself and everyone else to live out the greatest commandment, to love the Lord God with all of our heart, mind, soul,
Mm.
and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. But that is so easy to say, but so complicated to do.
Yes.
And
Amen.
so, yeah, so those are my two writing projects and my podcast. And then I would just love to connect because, again, I believe every conversation, every encounter, it really does matter. And so you can find me at Rachael Adams Author on Instagram and Facebook, and that's spelled Rachael. And then my website is rachelkadams.com. And I have some free resources like a love offering calendar on there if you want to put these things that we've talked about into practice.
Yes. And I will have all of these links in the show notes so you can grab her links to her devotional and find her Instagram all in the show notes below. Take a couple minutes to do that. And with all of this being said, Rachel, I am so beyond grateful to have spent some time with you here today and for your courage and vulnerability that it takes to share your story. Please continue to walk in the light and truth that God has called you to share about, and use your voice and unique giftings to lead with love. You are such an encouragement and inspiration to many, and are changing lives in ways that are only possible through carrying an anointing that you may or may not even be aware of. Keep confidently showing up and letting God guide your path towards the freedom that He has called you into. You, my friend, are created worthy. Thanks for listening and tuning in to the Created Worthy podcast. I hope that today's show resonated with you. And if it did, can you do me a huge favor and go leave a 5-star review? This helps more listeners find the show, and it expands the reach of the stories and concepts that are shared here. All the links and guest information are in the show notes. And if you're on social media, come hang out with me. You can find the Created Worthy podcast on both Instagram and Facebook, or come follow along with my personal IG page, where I just share more about the real, sometimes messy life of your fellow worthy warrior. Can't wait to talk to you soon, friend. And don't forget, we are all created worthy.